G'day fans and welcome back to another exciting episode of Nerdin' with the Dags. It is the third episode of 4, so this is the penultimate one, if you will, because after next week, that's it. There's no more. We're done and dusted. We pack up, go home, and we get into February, and with a bit of luck, February we'll see a brand new show of Rip It Off the Card kick into place. Now, the funny thing is, I kind of did a massive stuff up today, right? So I scheduled this thing a couple of days ago. And unbeknownst to me, it was scheduled for 8 a.m. this morning instead of 8 p.m. tonight. So if you were one of those really, really keen puppies who was just hanging out to Nerd with the Dags and actually joined in at 8 this morning, yeah, I do apologize because that clearly wasn't going to be the case. And I was actually still in bed snoring my nerdy little head off at that particular time. How good was that? So there you go. I love this one for Husky Babes. As always, yeah, Dags, absolutely awesome. And Lewis, good to see Lewis joining the show. This could be like an hour of your life you're never going to get back. So hopefully you guys enjoy everything that's going on. And very, very cool. My number one local fan, Mr. Gavin, has joined us because it was his idea that I should do this show in the first place. That's the most important thing. And of course, I've got Christy and Colin and various other people as well. So Thomas and Joe, which is awesome. Very, very groovy. Now, one of the reasons why this show is actually existing, aside from the fact that it gives me something to do on a Wednesday night, it's all about just putting some joy back in the world, because whenever you watch the news, it's all bad news. The world's going to the shit big time. And I thought, well, what's the way to put some smiles back on people's faces? Just talk about Star Wars and nerdy shit. How good is that? So with a bit of luck, if I'm able to, you can forget your troubles for a little period of time. That will be the most important thing of all. Good stuff. Grant said, good afternoon. He must be in a different part of the planet because it's an evening here, but it's good to see Grant joining us no matter what. Now, it's kind of ironic we're talking about Star Wars tonight because as of to now, if you will, the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 4 is out, right? And if you remember the saga from last week, oh my guacamole, the streets of Mos Espa, the fan base was split in two. There was arguments of plenty of people just cracking the biggest shits ever over what happened in that particular episode. So I don't know if Chapter 4 is going to be any better, but with a bit of luck, it will be okie dokie. And as always, we do a review show on the Monday night, so we'll be discussing anyway when the time comes. So, but the fact that you're watching me instead of the Book of Boba Fett is absolutely fantastic. I'm trying to get my hair straight because I'm on camera, and this is actually being recorded for prosperity, and we'll have to suss out how that goes. How good is that counter one? Which counter are you talking about? So the shopping counter. Very good. Like this was Star Wars boring. Yeah, I know. Of all the things to talk about, what can I say? The Wars on the Zone. It should be the Wars in the Zone, but I actually really like that one, Colin. Well done, sir. So good stuff. Yes, Mos Vespa indeed, which is the saga from last week. But anyway, so tonight is actually a bit of a funny one because we're actually going to be discussing. I'm going to be discussing effectively the Star Wars saga, my thoughts and views, and various other bits and pieces. And it's a lot to really cover off. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background as to my history, if you will, before we sort of bring up a couple of topics and discussion points. And I really do want people to sort of put their thoughts and views forward as to what I'm saying, whether they agree or disagree, or they've got any questions they want to ask. And that's the key thing, because ultimately that's what this show is all about. It's all about the feedback, not just me yapping on for the full hour and a bit or whatever it happens to be. So, yes, I like this one from Russell. It should be the Star Crash Experience episode. Yeah, well, we're not talking about Star Wars rip-off movies. We're talking about the real thing, so which is particularly groovy. So, yeah, we're talking about the Star Wars saga, and that is a lot to cover off. But importantly, the important thing is, kids, and this is I really want to stress this out. Everybody needs to keep calm and take it easy. I mean, there's a lot, especially in the past recent 7 years, a lot of anti-Disney sentiments, a lot of anti-Kathleen sentiments. Don't even bother posting stuff like that. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to read it at all. So the idea is we're celebrating the franchise right across its 45-year history. So it's not about pointing fingers at people and being critical and nasty and all the rest of it. I mean, there's constructive criticism to a point, but being just vindictive doesn't get us anywhere, and that's not what this episode is about. So very, very groovy. I just wanted to get that out of the way. So there we go. Disclaimer done and dusted. So now I don't know about you guys, but it all for me started back in 1977. Now, this photograph I think was taken in England, right? And of course, you see the crowds, all the dudes, and you got the flares and all the rest of it. Yeah, it's 1977. Got to deal with that, right? And the thing is, this could have easily have been me, right? You look at the picture on the right-hand side of that kid, and I was 10 years old when Star Wars came out in 77, right? And it's kind of funny because there are so many fans now of the franchise who came in after that fact, right? Were born like 20 years ago and all this sort of thing, who just were not around when all this was first kicking off. And of course, back then it was just a movie, right? It was a very successful movie, but it was just a film. And I look at that little kid looking at the dudes wearing the t-shirts, thinking, I would have been like blown away, thinking, oh my God, I've got to get me a Star Wars t-shirt. And back then I was a huge Darth Vader fan. And as a consequence, I loved it. So I look at that kid in that picture and I go, I could easily just like superimpose myself into that and go, yep, man, I'm just hanging out. Because when the film came out, I was still in primary school. And then from there, a whole bunch of us used to go and see it once every few weeks in the cinemas because it was the only place you could see it was in the cinemas. So, yeah, Michael said he must have seen it on his birthday, best birthday present ever. Oh, well, that's a good one, actually. So I still remember my first screening like it was yesterday. I've written about it in various articles and I've just covered it off and I just like it. I got it all down to a T. I know exactly what happened. I don't know the date, but I know everything about what occurred that particular day. So I think it's quite interesting. And I can't speak for everybody else, but in my case, to go and see a film and how you were when you walked into the cinema and how you walk out 2 hours later, you're a different person. And that sets you on a path. That path that night has led me right to where I am right now and all you people watching the show. So how good is that? May the Vile be with you. Yes, we're the good. It's good to see the Vile is here to violate us, which is particularly important. So, yes, groovy. More flares than a J.J. Abrams. That's actually grouse. That's a grouse comment, actually. I really like that one, Rusty Babes. Well done, sir. So the good thing is everybody has their own stories to tell. So, and this is my little one. And you are right, Gavin. We have indeed been violated, as we should. That's the most important thing of all. So just as a bit of a, I don't need to get a sip of, you're seeing it here live, folks. Is it blue milk? It should be. What can I say? So to give you a bit of an indication as to who I am, now there are people watching the show. Most of you guys already know who I am. Yeah. Oh, okay. I just realized what you realized. Yeah, put up a stool in the canter and enjoy. Yeah, gotcha. How many times do I think of a scene in New Hope? Over 100. I know that much. So you got to remember, though, to be fair, I mean, it was talking about a 45-year journey. So, but for me, yeah, easily 100 plus. So there's no denying that at all. In fact, I think the last time I saw it was only a couple of years ago. So, but yes. So to give you a bit of background as to who I am, and the reason why I'm on this show, and the reason why I'm going to be saying what I'm saying, is I thought, well, everybody on this show primarily is a Star Wars fan. As I said, we've all got our own stories. So what makes me any different to anybody else? And I thought, well, I'll just chuck in a couple of details for those who don't know. So, because otherwise I could just be any other knob doing a show discussing Star Wars. So first and foremost, back in 1983, and I have covered this off on another show, my first Star Wars journey started in 1983 when I painted a mural on my high school wall, which is still there as of 2014. I haven't been back there since. So hopefully in 2024, when I do go back, it'll still be there on my high school wall. So even then, after seeing Star Wars, that had such a profound impact on me that when Jedi was coming out in 1983 and I was in year 10 or 11 at this point, I opted to paint a mural on the high school wall celebrating Star Wars. So that was my first step, if you will, into a larger world regarding where my Star Wars life was going to take me. Glenn has said there's not enough time for a lot. Well, there isn't, unfortunately. And I've actually had to cut this down a little bit because I've actually got a lot more than this that you can possibly imagine. What can I say? Russell said he saw Star Wars on Rosebud and Citizen Kane and Mos Espa. Go figure. Yeah, okay. Very, very groovy. And where's my pet Bantha? She was here earlier and she was moaning and groaning and carrying on, but she's nicked off now. So that's my cat, by the way. So I thought I'd just bring that up. And there's not that many 70s murals that survived. It wasn't from the 70s. It was from 83 when this was painted. So there you go. But it was put under a protective trust so that they didn't destroy the murals. And as I said, in 2014, it was still there. So yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Well, 1980s. But so anyway, okay, I'm a school kid. I paint a picture on the wall. Big deal. Okay, what? Move on. But the key thing is that in 1988, when this was launched, I was the co-founder of Star Walking Inc., the Star Wars Appreciation Society of Australia, and I served on its committee, organising events, conventions, and banquets, and whatever else for 27 years. So I sort of, what I thought, gave back to the community, as it were. And of course, for those who have really good memories, Star Walking, especially throughout the 1990s, was just unequaled in the world. We were just world leaders back then. And I was right in the middle of all that. So being a key figure of Star Walking allowed me to do things for the Star Wars fan community that you couldn't do anywhere else because there was nowhere else to go. And that, of course, then led into things like being like the editor of the club's newsletter. So I edited 36 issues of the club's newsletter, and there's a point to why I'm explaining all this, right? So, and this is just a sample of some of the covers that I produced back in the day. So I edited 36 issues of the club's newsletter. I also participated in, it would be hundreds of hours of Star Wars discussions, auctions and panels and parties and trivia events and all the rest of it. So there was a long bit of history where I was behind the microphone and I was up the front, sort of like flying the flag for Star Wars, as it were. And since then, of course, I've been involved with all these podcasts. So I did Star Talking, the podcast. There's over 70 hours of that, if you will, once you include it with Mos Eisley Monthly. So the bottom line is I had a lot of Star Wars exposure, right? A lot. And that, of course, meant that I was even recently referred to as a super fan by the current editor of the Force newsletter. So the bottom line of all that is, for the most part, I like to think I know what I'm talking about. So it's really quite insane. So the key thing is that I'd like to think that because I've talked about it that much and been exposed to it that much, and because when you're the editor of a newsletter, you're absorbing Star Wars all the time. You know, when you're running the conventions and doing the fan club meetings and all the rest of it, it's with you constantly. And I found that actually helped being up to date with everything and being sort of like a bit of a super nerd, if you will, regarding Star Wars. And that to me was actually really, really important. I was like that for a very, very long period of time. Oh my goodness, there's all these comments. I've just missed them all. Hang on, hang on. Regarding the picture, some recent decent art skills day. Well, yeah, you got to remember, I realized I was only like 16 when I did that picture. So I was just a kid, really. And as it turned out, I left school before I finished it. So I had to go back and go back on my own time and sort of all that. Weren't you the editor of the magazine? I was. 36 issues. In fact, I was the one who changed it from paper-based to digital-based. So if you're getting the digital, if you're a part of Star Walking now and you're getting the digital copy of the newsletter, I was the one who I personally instigated that. And in fact, in issue 150, which only came out last week, has articles about the history of the newsletter, which I wrote. So yes. Rico said, "Live Star Walking only a few years later. We got Last Jedi." Jesus Christ. Remember, read the disclaimer at the start. Yeah, play kitty, well, kiddies, but yes, exactly right. Michael's referring to Star Walking, the convention. That was the very first convention. It was also known as Stair Walking because the elevator broke. There's only one elevator in the entire hotel, and all our events on the 5th floor, and the elevator broke down after the first few hours. It was called Stair Walking. So there was a long bit of history there. As I said, there's a lot of history that I could cover off, a lot, right? But I'm sort of condensing it down for the point of what's going on here. And a lot of people here remember those Star Walking conventions, which was really, really groovy. I am a Star Wars sponge. Well, I was, and that's the thing. I mean, I really did absorb it because throughout the 1990s, the Star Wars fan community was my life, right? I mean, sure, I had fingers and other pies for other fan clubs, but in terms of an organizer and making things happen, it's what I did. It's all I did. I did nothing else. So I was a bit of a hardcore. I was a hardcore nerd, and I was very, very proud of that because we're doing such great things. It wasn't a case of just sitting behind a screen writing, blogs on the Jedi Force councils and stuff, because those things didn't exist. It was actually physically going out and doing something. Christy said, one of the first people I met at the first Star Wars Christmas party, that was 1994, and I actually remember that, Christy. So, because 1994, when the first Star Wars fan club meeting occurred in February, we had 94 people turn up. And aside from the committee, everybody, for them, it was their very, very first time. They'd never met each other before. And from that, all these friendships formed, all these relationships. And of course, people I know today were friends from that particular event. So I saved thousands of trees. Yes, actually, from an environmental perspective, that was one reason of changing to a digital format as opposed to paper-based. So yes, very, very groovy. I'm still doing a magnificent job. Well, the fact that you guys are all still watching me is a testament to my gas bagging abilities. We thought they'd never end. We love Jar Jar forever. Okay, very, very groovy. Okay, so anyway, so the point where I was going with all that. Okay, so I've done all the conversations and I've done all the auctions and I've done all the meetings and I've done all the talks and I've done the trivias and this and that and bullshit. The bottom line is, and I've just realized I've just cut half my thing off, is that being a knowledgeable fan is actually hard these days because there is so much to remember. Now, once upon a time, there were only 3 movies. Actually, there's only one movie, right? Then it became 3 movies and that was it, right? And there might have been some books like the Lando Calrissian books and Han Solo books and the West End Games stuff. But for the most part, it was just 3 movies, right? Now, if you look at what's here today, and if you want to be a nerd, this is like from a trivia perspective, you look at what there is to try and remember, right? So there are effectively, with Star Wars, 11 live action movies. So you got the 9 saga movies and the 2 anthology films, right? This is as of today, right? There are 2 live action TV series, and one of those has gone for like 3 seasons. There are 4 animated TV series, right? And of course, they've all got their seasons, like Clone Wars went for 6 seasons or something, or 7 seasons or whatever else. There was the animated film of the Clone Wars that was actually theatrically released in this country. And of course, there's no end of comics, books, games, and all these things. And the bottom line is that being a fan is hard work. It's actually quite difficult now because there's so much to absorb. And as a result, as I've gotten older, I'm forgetting a lot of stuff, right? And that's the big problem because it's getting to the stage of stuff I used to know backwards. I'm now starting to struggle to remember because there's just so much to pack into one's head. There are people out there who are really good at this stuff, like really, really good, but they're younger than me. So in our discussions tonight, there are going to be things that people might say, you know what, you're wrong on that because of this comic reference this or this episode reference that. And I'm going to go, yeah, okay, I didn't know that because it's just too much. You look at Wikipedia, for example, there's like 10 million freaking entries of that. It's just absolutely madness. So there you go. Christy, holiday special, no one ever talks about, how nor should they? Yes, that is definitely one thing I don't cover off. So there are definitely not, that was canon stuff, right? So non-canon stuff, you've got the Ewok movies and the Droids cartoon and the Ewok cartoon and holiday special. So I've discounted those. I was just sticking with canon only. I'm very, very pedantic about canon, non-canon, which is funny because I've got a topic about that later on. And you're right, Russell, there is a lot of books and comics, and it's frustrating because somebody will say, oh, this happened in a comic. And go, did it? I didn't know that. Oh, just, there are people who absorb this stuff for breakfast. And I did once upon a time, but now I'm sort of a bit behind the 8 ball. But anyway, we're here to celebrate it and to see how we go. So I've got a couple of topics of conversation I want to bring up. A couple of lighthearted ones, a couple of in-depth ones. And at the end, at the very, very end, I'm going to tell you 5 fun facts about my Star Wars existence that most people didn't even know. So how good is that? So there you go. Good stuff. Grant has said his 12-year-old son is on YouTube and tells me information. Oh, no, it's mind-blowing. There's so much of it now. It's crazy. And as I said, from a trivia perspective, and this is, I'll tell you a funny story in a second. From a trivia perspective, there's just so much to absorb. And the trivia I've got to tell you is that a few years ago, I was on a cruise when cruises still existed. And the cruise person was saying that they were doing trivia quizzes for pop culture things. And they're doing a Star Wars one, right? Now, this is a 100% true story. And I thought, oh, I've got to be involved with that because that was the first time they'd ever have a Star Wars trivia quiz on a cruise ship, right? All these teams of people turn up, all these people. And I thought, well, I'm just going to be me. It's just me and nobody else, right? And I actually had an anxiety attack thinking, if I get beaten by a bunch of just dudes over there, just random puppies, how embarrassing is that going to be? So I was really stressed because I thought I actually have to perform as a Star Wars nerd, as a once upon a time trivia guru. I have to do well, and I was obviously on my own. And I actually was panicking. So it wasn't until the questions started coming through, I thought, oh, yeah, I know this, I know that. And as it turned out, I won. It was 20 questions, I got 19 right. And the one question was not a Star Wars question, effectively. So I ended up winning on my own, right? So I felt better about that. But at the time, prior to that occurring, this is why I don't like trivia quizzes. I was actually freaking out. I was like, oh, shit. You know, imagine losing to just some geriatrics over there who just happened to be passing by and said, oh, yeah, we'll just jump into a trivia quiz and away we go. Not good. So, yes. All right. Where are you? I like this one. Yeah, Jedi mind tricks don't work on me. Exactly right. All right. So, here's the first question that we're going to chuck in. This is a bit nerdy. So, as it is, you are nerding with the Dags tonight. So, we're going to talk about who's Anakin's old man? Who's Anakin's father? Right. Now, some of this stuff we have covered off in the podcast before. But hey, it's a new audience here. And I just realized what the comment was. Yeah, Jedi Hand, when there is no Christmas special. It wasn't a Christmas special. It was a holiday special. So just clarify that. It was nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. So very, very good. All right. So here's a question for you, fans. Who was Anakin's father? Now, I had theories about this 20-something years ago. Okay. And of course, it's never been covered off. So in the story, of course, Qui-Gon catches up with Shmi. Shmi just says, yeah, there was no father. It's the, what do you call it? The something or other birth of the Jesus Christ scenario where it just appears out of nowhere. And that was it. I just dropped it after that. And of course, well, that was complete tripe, right? But there are certain hints along the way through the entire saga as to who the father might be. Now, it's never been clarified, it's never been confirmed, but I had my theories, and I'm sticking with my theories until someone tells me otherwise, and they kind of have, but I don't care. This is the Dag theory, right? Anakin is Jar Jar's love child. No, I don't think so. Who provided the who provided the tadpole? No, none of that. Thank you, Christy. Immaculate Conception, exactly right. So it had been hinted. This is why I love the prequel trilogy, right? They cover all this detail, and if you look past Anakin, Hayden Christensen's sort of poor acting and some of the really dodgy dialogue, there's some really, really good stuff there. The key thing is, and I thought, oh my God, what I suspected was completely true. Get to Revenge of the Sith, and the line, Darth Plagueis was a Dark Lord of the Sith who could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life. Now, of course, people cracked the shits when the midichlorians were first announced in The Phantom Menace. Oh my God, the Force is not a biological thing, it's a mystical thing, right? And of course, everybody, if you remember back in 1999, went up in arms over this. And I thought, hang on, but when you get to the later movie, it actually makes sense as to what's going on. So there is nothing to say at all that either Darth Sidious or Darth Plagueis actually used the funky mojo, if you will, on Shmi Skywalker to create Anakin. And that's the reason why they did that intentionally, because he was to be the future dark side of the Force Sith Lord, right? And it just made so much sense to me. I thought, well, yeah, of course. And the key thing to remember is that Anakin was not born on Tatooine. And if you look at Shmi Skywalker's backstory, she was shifted from planet to planet here, there, and everywhere before she ended up on Tatooine, because Anakin was 3 years old when he first arrived. Because he actually says in the movie, when Padme asked me, how long have you been here? And he says, since 3, I think. So where was he for the previous 3 years? They could have been anywhere. So he was not born on Tatooine. That's actually quite important. The midichlorians increase the sensitivity to the Force, which is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is that based on that one bit of dialogue where Plagueis could influence the midichlorians to create life, what's to say he didn't create it in Shmi Skywalker? And she was picked for a reason. Okay, they didn't just pick some random person. She was picked for a reason. Now, the irony is, of course, that with Shmi, we know nothing about it, like zero, right? She is a Skywalker, and Luke says in Jedi that Luke, the Force runs strong in my family, and he says, I have it, my sister has it, my father has it, right? Doesn't say anything about the grandmother, right? It's a grandmother, isn't it? Yeah. And what about Shmi? And what about her parents? And what about her siblings, right? It's just not covered off at all. And why is she a Skywalker? Is she a Skywalker by marriage or by birth? And none of that is touched on anywhere, right, in any canon source whatsoever. So who's to say that if you go back far enough, that she's got really, really strong Force connections? And of course, if you want to take it a step further, when Yoda says in The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke is flying off, that boy's our last hope, and Yoda says, no, there is another. I originally thought, looking at it in hindsight, many decades later, maybe it's a sibling of Shmi, Shmi's brother, Shmi's cousin, uncle, whatever, because she would have to have connections with the Force as well. So it was just one of those things. You could delve really right into it in a big way. And they did subtly touch on it in one of the comics, which I thought was kind of groovy to say that Palpatine or Plagueis was involved with the birth. But it just made complete sense. There was no father. Therefore, the Immaculate Conception started. How Darth Plagueis can create life. 2 and 2 together, bang, Anakin's born, he ends up becoming Darth Vader, the ultimate Sith Lord, bang. All too easy. See? Simple as that. How hard could that be, kids? Comparable to the Kwisatz Haderach. Yes, actually, it's exactly what it is. It's done by design, and we took it a step further, and we even suggested that maybe Palpatine was aware of Shmi, because having the kid, Anakin, and made a point of ensuring she stayed on Tatooine, kept her as a slave, said, okay, you guys look after her, don't mistreat her, because she's clearly not mistreated in the movie, got her own hut and all the rest of it. Just look after her because she's got a very, very important kid. You can really stretch this out if you want. But the logic works. That's the key thing about it. So, divine intervention, yeah. Midi-clones were funky. Yeah, you're right, doing the funky chicken. But the funky gibbon, there's a lot of funky stuff going on here. What can I say, hey? Oh my God, nerd alert. Well, you got to expect it. This is what this discussion is all about, right? And yes, very, very cool. And you are right, it's too late. But there are some fun things coming up, so don't stress, kids. Yes, they're very, very cool. So yeah, even if it's not true, the thing is, it does actually work. So there you go. All right, so this one's going to upset Gavin. Was Yoda responsible for the Jedi Order's failings? So the thing about the Jedi Order is that not everybody liked them, right? So if you remember the episode in the Clone Wars, someone actually, it's Barriss Offee, actually bombs the Jedi Temple. And of course, we had the Lost 20, which was referenced in the prequel trilogy, Jedi Masters who voluntarily buggered off out of the Jedi, right? And Count Dooku was obviously one of them. So if the Jedi Order is such a fantastic, benevolent organization, why are they having a few sagas? Why are they having a few issues? And now there's a lot to be discussed on this, but we're going to keep it relatively simple. And the theory that we came up with in one of our discussions is that Yoda's been training for Jedi for 800 years, right? So he makes a point of that. And part of the whole thing of being a Jedi is you can't have connections, you can't have friendships, you can't have relationships, all that sort of stuff. You've got to live the life of a monk. So who's to say that when he was a young dude, little young green dude, he didn't get connected with somebody, right? Have a relationship with somebody and then end badly, or a friendship that ended badly, or something like that. And he, because he was so strong in the Force, kind of cracked the shits and ended up heading down the dark path. And then he realized, shit, that's not the way to go. Oh, we can't have that. This is dangerous stuff. So then he, because he's obviously older than anybody else in the Jedi Order, puts in the doctrine for the Jedi Order, no friendships, no relationships, no possessions, right? Because he doesn't want what he experienced to happen to anybody else. And of course, as the generations roll on, people just take it as for granted. You join the Jedi Order as a child, you do that because that way you've got no preconceived ideas as to what life is. And as a consequence, we can actually mold you into the way that we want. And that means you get used to the fact you live the life of a monk, just like Qui-Gon does. Not Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan does. And that really does make a lot of sense. So Yoda, in other words, he's molded the Jedi Order to cover up for what he almost happened to him back in the day. And when you look at it from that perspective, it works, because if you did have relationships, friendships, and all the rest of it, then you do leave yourself open to anger, jealousy, aggression, yada, yada, yada. You know, imagine you're a Jedi Knight, your friend's a Jedi Knight, and you're both after the same Jedi chick, and there's a bit of a threesome sort of going on there in terms of the tension. It doesn't end well. The problem is they took it to extremes, right? And connections with people is basically what life is about, right? You're not meant to lead a solitary existence. So when someone dies and they say, or your friend dies, oh, mourn them, do not miss them, do not. It's like, well, you can't do that. That's suppressing all your emotion. And if you do that, eventually it's going to explode. And so that's possibly why some people said, no, the Jedi Order's got issues. I can't handle it anymore. I want to go out and buy that ultra rare collectible. I want to go out and take that girl on a date. It doesn't necessarily end well for everybody. So, and on top of all that, just quickly before I get to the comments, the key thing is that even in the Clone Wars, it's pointed out that the Jedi Order are seen as an elite group, because you can't just join them, right? You can't just walk in one day and go, can I please be a Jedi Knight? No. It doesn't work that way. So not everybody is a fan of the Jedi Order, because they're a bit of a, got this gigantic temple on Coruscant. You can't join them if you don't want, even if you wanted to. And for that reason, everybody thinks they're a bit snobbish, if you will. So there you go. How about that one? Nerd monks. Yeah, a bit like that. Yoda After Dark. Love it. Isn't George Lucas part of the Lost 20? Had his statue? May have been. It was a deleted scene. That was the key thing. This is getting dirty. Oh, well, it depends on how you define dirty. Here we go. The Jedi became bureaucratic and fight about emotional health. Yeah, exactly right. So, and I think a lot of that all started with Paul Yoda. So Yoda had a bit of a moment back in his past. He said, right, this is how it's going to be from now on. And of course, it just followed on throughout the generations, because the key thing, and this actually happens in real life, if you have a really, really, really long lifespan, the problem is you end up outliving everybody, right? You outlive your friends, your family, and then they get replaced, and then you outlive them again. And so it probably makes sense that from his perspective and Yoda's perspective, he doesn't want to have connections with anyone, because he knows that you get too attached to someone and they pass away because you've outlived them, and you're not happy about it. So there you go. How about that? Anakin told Padme then Jedi were encouraged to love. Yeah, he sort of twisted the words a little bit. There's love and there's love, but not love a person, because clearly they don't go for attachments and all the rest of it, and relationships and all this sort of thing. I mean, his relationship with Padme was illegal, effectively. And she even said, you're going to get kicked out of the Jedi Order. So he twisted the words, all right? So he found a loophole that wasn't there. And that's the reason why he couldn't even tell the Jedi Order, oh, I've hooked up with the senator. And they're going to say, nah, you're going to get kicked out of the Order. It's like, yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world to deal with. And of course, because he joined later as a child, they didn't like brainwash him, if you will, into saying relationships are a bad thing. So as I said, there's a lot more you can discuss. And believe me, as I said earlier, hundreds of hours discussing this sort of stuff with other people. And it's absolutely spectacular. So Love it. But if the Force runs in the families, is Grogu Yoda's child? Not necessarily, but it could be. That's something that hasn't been touched on. The thing about the Yoda species is we do not know how they procreate. Now, there's 3 of them at the moment, right? So you got Yoda, Yaddle, which everybody forgets about from the Phantom Menace, and Grogu. You do not know how they procreate. So it is not beyond the realms of impossibility that Yoda has an offspring. However that occurs, it might happen naturally. You know how like some, was it lizards or whatever, can sort of be both sexes at the same time and all this sort of thing. It's certainly possible, right? But they're not hinting at anything. So, yes, exactly right. But it's a good theory. And if they did do it that way, that would be kind of cruel. Kind of cool. So there you go. Long life is not everything. You are right, Mr. Glenn. It's all about the quality of life. So there we go. How are we all going so far? We're loving the nerd talks, mate. If you were in a party at my place, you'd spend hours talking about this stuff, right? Whether you agree with it or don't agree with it is irrelevant. The fact is it's all there. All the, what do you call it? The carrots are being dangled. You just got to grab them. And some people just don't see this stuff at all. And good on them too. They don't want to. They just want to see what they see on the screen and just walk away happy. So, all right, cool. Roosie. Yeah, good on you. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, George said that Yoda was a love child of Kermit and Miss Piggy. Well, yeah, it's not far from the... Yes, Nerd Fest. And guess what? I'm still going. How good is that? All right. So, in recent times, Rey is a Palpatine. Now, this is something no one saw coming. I remember all the discussions regarding who was Rey and her parents, right? Because in the Force Awakens, you just see the whole flashback bizzo. Everybody said, oh, she's got to be a Skywalker. She's got to be a Kenobi, right? And everybody's just trying to join all these dots that could not be joined. And not a person that I can even recall, because there was a lot of discussion about it from years, actually, was saying Rey was a Palpatine. Because people couldn't put 2 and 2 together. And even I had said, and in fact, I did say this at Skyforce meetings. I said, well, hang on. If you take Palpatine back in his younger days when he wasn't the Emperor, and he did the funky chicken or the funky gibbon, as you will, with an intern of the office at the Senate chambers on Coruscant, then who's to say that she didn't get impregnated and then she had a kid and Rey was the kid, right? But I said that as a joke. I wasn't being serious. And as it turned out, I wasn't that far from the truth. So, yeah, it was all pretty good stuff. So, as it turned out, this is the bit, I guess, with Rise of Skywalker that kind of worked and kind of didn't work, right? So there's a clone, a strand cast of Palpatine. They've added in all this other interesting sort of genetic shit into the mix, so he doesn't even look like Ian McDiarmid. Has no Force sensitivity whatsoever. Meets the girl, has the kid, and the kid is Rey, and she's just chock-a-block full of Palpatine's powers, right? It was a lot to absorb, and I actually watched Rise of Skywalker last night because I've only ever seen the movie twice prior to that, and I really wanted to sort of see, does it work, does it fit? And for the most part, it kind of does to a point. Now, the thing with Rise of Skywalker, and you have to take this into consideration, and I said about this in a review I did of the movie. When JJ got around to doing Rise of Skywalker, right, his main bad guy had been killed off, which, as it turned out, was Snoke, right? Luke had died, and of course, Carrie Fisher had passed away. So that was a bit of a tough one to deal with. It's like, how are you going to deal with this particular saga? And to his credit, I think for the most part, what they've done has worked, even if some of the numbers don't add up. So in this case, Snoke was also a strand cast of Palpatine as well. I've gone through and I've read all the stuff about the Sith Eternal, what the deal is with all those guys. It's pretty intense stuff, but by and large, it works out okay. And I'm going to be covering off the rest of the saga a little bit later on. So yes, that's where Rey comes in. Now, we're at the end of the movie when she just simply says, oh, I'm now a Skywalker. Does that wash? Probably not. But it does explain why she was so powerful, because she was connected with Palpatine. But the fact that her father, had no Force capabilities whatsoever, yeah, that was kind of like jumping a generation. Not entirely sure how that works. So, yes. Both bold of you to assume JJ never had a plan. Well, yeah, I think it's pretty much a known fact that the sequel trilogy, was not planned in advance. And the middle movie kind of screwed the pooch big time, because Snoke was clearly set up as the main bad guy. And obviously Carrie Fisher wasn't meant to pass away, and Luke was meant to continue on, and of course all that got changed. So in the end, Paul JJ was like, all right, how do I fix that? And you got to take that into consideration, and for the most part it worked okay. So, but we'll discuss all that probably a little bit later on. Yay team, how good is that? We all still hanging out there? Good stuff. I do have some funny stuff coming up later on. The Viola said, did George have plans originally? So that, yes, is the answer. And apparently when they were getting around to doing the 3 movies, the sequel trilogy, they looked at his storyline going, yeah, it's kind of not working. So they ditched him and created The Force Awakens. And you got to remember, The Force Awakens was a movie that had to work, right? Disney invested so much money, it had to be successful. And that's why they took all the best bits of the previous movies, because they'd obviously worked before, stuck them into one movie. Force Awakens was the answer. And sometimes you've got to take that into consideration. But we'll be discussing the saga later on. Oh, yeah, everybody's planning to make a lot of money. Yes, exactly right. It was actually Steven Spielberg who once said, you make a movie, it makes more money, you make more movies. So there you go. Now, this is something that was actually asked by Gavin, believe it or not, who's actually watching tonight, about the symbolism of the Dagobah cave. What's the deal with that? And of course, the thing with The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke goes into the cave and he meets Vader, and kills Vader, and he's got Luke's head inside, and you go, oh, this is all pretty freaky shit. What's the deal with all that? And the funny thing is, it's never really sort of been explained as to what the deal was with the cave. Why was there a dark side presence on the cave? Now, it's worth noting that if you have watched the Clone Wars series, the Lost Missions, Yoda had been to Dagobah prior to arriving as part of his exile, which is, throwing the story, the canonicity right out the window. And why would there be a dark side cave there to start with? And I don't think anybody has an answer. And maybe that's not a bad thing, because that way fans can come up with their own suggestions, their own ideas, and their own theories. And no one's right and no one's wrong. But one I did hear was like some dark side user, Sith Lord, whatever, back a million years ago, crashed and died on Dagobah in the cave, and that's the reason why that person's presence still lingers. So, yeah, sometimes it's good when there are no answers, sometimes, but there you go. Am I a fan of the Star Wars games? No, I never really got into the games. I did play some of the computer games back in the day, like TIE Fighter and Dark Forces, but that's the 1990s. I don't play games effectively. So, and these days, a lot of the games are canon, especially like your Battlefronts and all the rest of it. It's crazy. So, Grant said it was the Rise of Skywalker that got my kids into Star Wars, and that's a very good point, because the whole film series is generational. So the original trilogy was for my generation. The prequel trilogy was for the younger generation, which is, if that makes sense, and the sequel trilogy is for the current generation. I'm talking about people of ages. So I didn't say that very, very well. The original trilogy was for 10-year-olds of my generation. Prequel trilogies was 10 years old in the 2000s, and the sequel trilogy is for 10-year-old kids in the 2015s or whatever. So that's the reason why it's working the way it is. Everything's sort of generational and sort of moves, but I'll get back to that a bit later on. Yes, very, very cool. Now, this one I thought was interesting, right? And then I do have some funny stuff coming up very, very soon. The whole thing regarding the First Order and the Final Order. So the First Order are the main antagonists for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. And then suddenly we discover in The Rise of Skywalker that there's something called the First Order, the Sith fleet, and all that sort of bizzo. And I see what they were trying to do, because we've always said, if you're going to, as the movies progress, your antagonists have to get worse and worse. And of course, you've got Palpatine in the last movie. He's got to have a big ass fleet that just appeared out of nowhere. The only thing I found was cockeyed with this is that you could easily have never had the First Order in the first place. Just let the New Republic do its thing and then come out with the Final Order 30 years after the fact with all your ships and all the rest of it, and off you go. So it's like saying you've got a proxy empire in place that's going to get replaced with another empire. And you go, I didn't sort of think that made sense. So I think, because you got to remember, in the movies, the New Republic is the government. They destroy Hosnian Prime with Starkiller Base, which is now based on Ilum, if you know your Clone Wars animated series. And the First Order, effectively, they're on equal pairing now. If anything, the First Order's got more power. So if that's the case, why do you need the Final Order? Anyway, so I always thought that was a bit kind of cockeyed. So if you don't analyze the movies enough or too much, like I tend to do, then you just take it at face value and go, you know what, it's worked. There's more big bad guys out there. They've got bigger ships and they've got big guns that can destroy planets just much like the Death Star could, and all sort of bizzo. Anyway, so yes, indeed. Gavin said he's still there eating dinner. Very, very cool. Good stuff. Where was I? Where are we? Yeah, exactly right, Gavin. Pew, pew. Love it. Hang on. Viola said, always thought it was created by Yoda Cave to teach Luke a bit of scary lesson. Well, that's right. It does. I mean, all it is, the cave on Dagobah is all about teaching you what you could become if you head down a certain path. And of course, he could become Vader if you will, and join the dark side. Ironically, who knew at the time that he was actually Vader's kid? But there you go. But yeah, if you have all this hatred for one particular character, then it manifests itself into saying, well, you could become that person if you go down the wrong path. I mean, that part was easy to figure out. So, but as to why the cave exists in the first place, that was the question. So there you go. Yes, Gavin's discussing Tyros. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of jumping around all over the place, aren't I? So yes, they were made in 70s for Gen X, 90s for millennials, and that'll do. Thank you very much. Yeah, exactly right. And that's why it's generational. And dare I say it follows the exact same principle as the Star Trek franchise. And every time they bring out a new series of whatever's movies or TV series, it's not for the fans of 50 years ago. It's for the fans of today or the new fans who don't exist yet. And that's important to sort of realize that. Where are we? All right, I'm going to chuck in something a little bit funny, a little bit humorous, right? So we're talking about the Sith, right? Can you imagine life as a Sith Lord, right? Now, I'm not talking the Rise of Skywalker version, right? I'm talking prior to that, right? This is an absolute classic. The joy of being a Sith Lord. There's only two of them, all right? So imagine the scenario 300 years prior to the Phantom Menace. Nobody knows the Sith exist at all, right? And you're a Sith Lord, you got your red lightsaber, and you recruit a dude, right? He's a Jedi dude, probably a Force-using dude, whatever. And you go, okay, dude, guess what? You are now a Sith Lord. Awesome. You got to look in the book to work out what name you're going to get called, right? You go, all right, henceforth, you should be known as Darth. And he has to look it up. And you go, now, is it done alphabetically? Or do they have numbers? Could it be Darth Vader the 15th? Or they just invent, okay, we're up to X's here, or Y after that. They've got to give him a name, right? Darth whatever. And as soon as you go, beauty, I am now Darth whatever, right? Actually, that's his name, Darth whatever. He's under the W's, right? Darth whatever. And he goes, beauty, can I go and tell anybody? Can I go home and tell my folks that I've now become a Sith Lord? And he goes, the master goes, no. Oh, okay. Can I go and tell my friends that I'm now a Sith Lord? He goes, no. Oh, okay. Can I go and tell my girlfriend that? No. And he goes, oh, what's the point of being a Sith Lord? You get a red lightsaber and you can't tell anybody who you are. So then you say to the master, all right, so what's my purpose in life? What am I meant to do? Now that I'm a Sith Lord, you're my master, I'm the apprentice, right? And the master will say, your job is to kill me. And you go, all right, cool, done. All right, I got that part figured out. As the apprentice, my job is to knock you off. And then what happens? And then he'll say, you find an apprentice of your own, and then down the track, he'll kill you. And you go, what's the friggin' point? Is that the career progression of a Sith Lord? What is the deal with that, right? And you go, well, what's the end game? It's like 400 years from now. This dude called Palpatine is going to be running the entire galaxy. But as of right now, it's just you and I. How good is this? Party, party, party. It's like, how crazy is that concept? I absolutely love it. It's hysterical. All right, what do we got here? It's a shame they didn't use the missing slave fleet of ships from the Heir to the Empire book trilogy. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the old expanded universe, or Legends as they call it, a bit later on. It's a tough job, but someone has to do it. I'm not sure which part that is. Being a Sith Lord, probably. We also thought it was the dumbest thing that the Sith somehow followed the rules as to how many there could be. Yeah, and the idea being behind that is that the Sith were notorious for destroying each other, which ironically is what happens, well, not happens, but is planning to happen in Rise of Skywalker. There are Sith everywhere on Exegol, right? Now, the group in the back, they're not Sith Lords, they're Sith Eternal, they're cultists, if you will. But clearly, the idea of there's only two people at any one point and nobody knows about them has gone out the window, right? Because they've got this entire group going on now. But yeah, the Sith were notorious for destroying each other. This is covered off in the Clone Wars. This is where Darth Bane came from. Instigated the rule of two. Done. Works good on paper. But the theory is, behind it, the practicality, it gets chucked out the window. And you go, that makes no sense whatsoever. I'm going to be a Sith Lord. I can't tell anybody. I get a red lightsaber that I can never use. And eventually, not only do I have to kill the dude who taught me to be a Sith Lord, but then I get knocked off by my own apprentice. What is the deal with that? And I get given a name based on a book. They go, Darth whatever, right? And they go, that's who I am today, Darth whatever. And I always thought that was quite amusing. So as a nerd, you think of these things, and I'm one of them. So having secrets is fun. I wouldn't think so, because if they said, oh, you've got to wait in the next few hundred years, then it's going to manifest itself into ruling the galaxy, you'd be pretty pissed off, wouldn't you? So there you go. Do you get life insurance as a Sith Lord? That's a classic one, actually. I don't know. And of course, you'd have that whole thing of you can't travel in the same ship at the same time, because if the ship crashes, the Sith is destroyed. Can't have that. Yeah, right. Ange beat me to it. Can't travel together, all the rest of it. So imagine the office Christmas parties at Christmas time. It's just the two of them. It's like, well, here we are. Really, you can't tell anybody. You can't anybody. It's just amusing when you sit and think about it. So there you But your rates are crazy. I'm not sure what rates you're referring to, but I do like the idea of it. So there you go. All right. So yeah, being a Sith Lord, and that's why they're so angry all the time. That's why, yeah, it's not what it's all cracked up to be. So yes, exactly right. At least Darth Maul got to do something, right? He got to go and slice and dice some dudes, as opposed to just being like everybody else and saying, "Well, I just got to keep it secret. Don't tell anybody." Shh. All right, this one I love. Right, this is something that no one picked up on. It just slipped through the keeper big time. In The Empire Strikes Back, right? The hyperdrive has gone on the Millennium Falcon, right? They get out of the asteroid field and yada yada yada, and they've disappeared. They've got to say they've got to get to Bespin, okay? And Han says, or actually Leia says, "Where are we?" And he says, "We're in the Inuit system," right? So they're nowhere near Bespin. And they said, "Okay, we've got to look. Oh, Lando's system. Lando's not a system. He's a man." And then Han says, "Bespin is pretty far, but I think we can make it." So the idea being they've got to get to Bespin, but they don't have hyperdrive, right? It doesn't work. We then cut back to Dagobah, Luke's training and all the rest of it. And I think that's probably where the cave comes from and all the sort of stuff. And then we cut back and we've arrived at Cloud City, right? The problem is it's not clarified as to how much time it took for them to get there. It is pretty far, but I think we can make it. How far is pretty far? Are we talking like a few hours? Are we talking a few days? Are we talking a week? Or are we talking a month? Now, if you're working on the view that Luke has to be trained by Yoda in that time period, there must be a period of time. So let's assume, for the sake of the argument, it's 1 month. It takes them 1 month to get from the Inuit system to Bespin, right? What do you do on the Millennium Falcon for that time, right? Now, you got to remember, they're all crammed together on the ship that's only meant to have 2 people on it, which is Chewbacca and Han, right? They got the droid, you got the 3PO, here's no big deal, but you got Leia on board as well. What do you do for food? What do you do for entertainment? And of course, you look out the windows and all you're seeing is space, right? Do you reckon they would have gone a bit crazy or what? And it is not covered off in the movie at all. Nobody even notices it. But they could not have had a scenario where they said, "We've got to get to Bespin. I think we can make it." And you get there 3 hours later. That's rubbish, right? It's got to be a period of time because Luke has to be trained in that time frame. And I reckon it's the ultimate gag. What went on in the ship in that time? I mean, did they go back through Lando's old sort of like what do you call it? His wardrobe and look at his capes and have a bit of a play? And you can only play chess for so long before you go a completely radio rental. And there's no TV as far as I'm aware, probably no internet either. What an absolute classic. So Luke was on Dagobah for weeks. Well, exactly right. Right. So the time frame kind of doesn't match up when you sit and think about it. And you got to love that, eh? So chess. So can you play chess for a month every day? And there's nothing else on board, right? And of course, you got to remember, how much water have you got on board? How much food? I mean, what Chewbacca, he's obviously going to molt a bit of fur, and how do they use the bathroom and all this sort of business. Got to absolutely play Spotto. No one thinks about it. I actually wrote an entire article regarding that once upon a time. I thought it was an absolute classic, but yeah. And in the movie, it's edited as if it happens almost instantaneously. So they just arrive the next day. So yeah, love it. You're right. People couldn't even stay in their homes for a week. So crazy would be exactly right. And it's just one of those. It could be an awesome story, a comic, a fan film, whatever, as to what happens. Oh, Bespin's pretty far. I think we can make it. I think we can make it. How long will it take us to get there? 3 weeks. Oh, God. So, yes, exactly right. Yeah, Han and Leia found something to do with each other. You remember, they weren't really a couple at this point, okay? They were sort of were, but sort of weren't. So, yeah, there's a lot of, like, tension in the room, that's for sure. So, there you go. I love it. Lee Brackett script, Bespin and Dagobah and Hoth all in the same system, but later reworked. Yeah. We don't need real life here, Rusky Babes. We're working in-universe, okay? Working on the in-universe. So, they play chess. You also have to let the Wookiee win every time. Exactly right. So, gotta love that. Now, this is something I just wanted to chuck in. Very, very cool. So back to something a little bit more interesting. The Force in the galaxy far, far away, right? For whatever reason, there's all these dudes who, this is back to the midichlorian count, who were born with high midichlorian counts. That's bad English. Get picked up by the Jedi and bang, you're a part of the Jedi Order, right? All good, all wonderful. And of course, you've got the good guys and you've got your bad guys. And these all younglings, they're all the goodies at this stage. You can tell from the colors of the sabers. And I just realized that dude back there's got a purple one. Oh, there you go. Do you know, by the way, do fans out there know why Mace Windu had a purple lightsaber? The only one who did actually have a purple lightsaber. So here you go. But the thing is that Force users are being born all the time, right? So the question, this goes back to the Shmoo Skywalker thing. Do the parents ever have that ability? I mean, so if you're a part of the Jedi Order, how do you procreate? Because clearly procreation is not sort of the deal, right? So does that mean it's sort of just the midichlorian count sort of just jumps around from person to person, and you get people who say, oh, look, my kid is suddenly really, really strong in the Force, but I'm not. I always wondered how that sort of worked, because you would think it'd get passed down from generation to generation. So I always thought that was rather interesting. And of course, as we saw in The Last Jedi, the kid, the broom boy, I mean, he's obviously Force sensitive. Force sensitive people are being born all the time. So even though in The Rise of Skywalker, for example, the Sith are destroyed and all this sort of stuff, there are still Force sensitive people being born, and there'll always be people who are nasty pasties, dark side users. So in the end, the whole process, will just repeat itself, if that makes any sense. But if you are interested in knowing more about the Force, there's an episode of the Clone Wars to deal with the Mortis arc, and it is really trippy shit, right? Okay, you got the son, the father, and the daughter, and how they all integrate with the Force. It's very, very cool stuff, but you really need to smoke the wacky tobacco to sort of deal with it. It's really, really intense shit. So, yeah, it's well worth checking out. But there's a lot more to the Force than what meets the eye, whether you buy the midichlorian thing or not. Mr. Chris, oh my goodness gracious, all the way from Queensland, joining in on the conversation. Absolutely fantastic. 1860. I'm not entirely sure what that is meant to be, but there you go. Purple sabers are for true. Yeah, well, exactly right. He did actually have BMF written on his lightsaber, but no, he actually specifically, Samuel L. Jackson specifically asked for a purple lightsaber blade so he could see himself in the in the crowd scenes, and it worked. So there you go. Why is 1960 coming up? I'm missing the reference there, kids. So yes, yeah. Thank you, Michael. So he can be picked out in the crowd, and sure enough, he could in the gymnasium arena. There is way over there. Good stuff. How does the kids get picked up? I can't see the Jedi changing nappies. And that's the funny thing, because in the story, so if you've had a Jedi child or a Force-sensitive kid, the Jedi come along and go, Beauty, we're going to have your kid, and off you go. And in fact, funnily enough, I was involved with a fan film, which, funnily enough, Chris is here right now discussing that exact scenario. So what happens if you don't want to give your kid up? Because they say, oh, we're going to come and take your kid away to join the Jedi Council. He'll never have a relationship, never have a friendship, never have a possession, and he'll never see or hear of you ever again. That's not exactly the way to go, is it? So unless they pay them off or whatever. But you do wonder what the deal is. So there must be some people who go, you know what? I don't want my kid to join the Jedi Order. And as we said at the start of the show, not everybody was a fan of the Jedi Order. So, yeah, as the audience, we just see everything in one big picture, and it's great and it's wonderful. The Jedi Order, yay, thumbs up. But in universe, it's a completely different set of circumstances. So some of those younglings, yeah, they may not be the happiest campers in the world. You just don't know. So there you go. Very, very cool. So it was discussed earlier about the whole EU Legends thing, post Return of the Jedi, Legends versus canon. Now, this, of course, occurred in 2012 when people who had invested hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in all the books and the comics throughout the 1990s, starting, as Rico said earlier, with Heir to the Empire, plowed right on through to 2012. This entire story was written after Return of the Jedi, was specifically set in that time period, and all that got wiped out in 2012 by Lucasfilm and the Story Group, right? And it obviously pissed a lot of fans off big time. I was the editor of the newsletter at the time. I was writing all about it. It was a bit of a big deal. And of course, when the movies came out, they ignored most of what was written in the Expanded Universe books. But a lot of people did ask later on, and I was one of them, who said, are there aspects of the story, of those stories, that actually work better than what we saw in the films? Could there, I mean, there are things that they carry over all the time, okay? We get that. But are there aspects of the story, and you say, you know what? They should have kept that from the Expanded Universe. And there are things that even I picked up on, even though I wasn't not an EU fan specifically, to say, you know what, this isn't such a bad idea. Why didn't they keep that? So I've got a couple I'm just going to rattle off, just for those who may or may not know as to how things played out. So, for example, in the Expanded Universe, and there are a lot of people out there who read all the books and the comics and absolutely really got dialed into it, because it was the only story that covered the post Return of the Jedi time frame, and it went for like like 30, 40 years, right? And all this stuff happened, and all the books sort of correlated with each other, which was absolutely fantastic. So the key one is that in the Legends books, for example, Chewbacca died, right? And that was a big deal. I think they killed him off in 2002, one of the books that they produced. And of course, in canon, Chewbacca is alive. So you're thinking, all right, well, that's one area when you go, okay, the movies have done it right. Chewbacca's alive. So even if you wanted to carry over the Expanded Universe stories into canon, you kind of can't because of this particular fact, which I thought was quite interesting. Another one, this one I thought was an interesting one. In the expanded universe stories, Han and Leia are still a couple, and I really like that. Whereas in like Force Awakens, they've separated, and I had a lot of issues with that. It took 3 movies to get them together as a couple, and then by the 4th movie, they've separated. And I was kind of a bit shitty about that. I'm thinking, hang on, the whole idea is they're supposed to be together and not have Han go back to his smuggling ways and Leia's now a general. Like, yeah, that kind of pissed me off a little bit. So at least in the expanded universe books, they were still a couple, and I really appreciated that. There's a comment here. The Jedi are evil from a certain point of view. Well, exactly right. Everything's to do with points of view, isn't it? Really, indeed. Died saving the Solo twins. Yeah, that's right. I can't remember the book, but I remember it was a big deal when it happened, right? Fans went, oh my God, they've killed off a major character. And they did actually have to ask George Lucas's permission to do it. So there you go. All right, so Han and Leia are still a couple in the expanded universe. I really loved it. In canon, they weren't, and I was a bit shitty about that, right? So in terms of kids, so we had Jason and Jaina Solo, right, in the books. And, of course, one of them goes off the deep end, becomes a dark side user. Ironically, in canon, we just have Ben Solo. So you could have potentially had 2 kids, but they've cut it down to 1, changed the name. Whatever. So if fans were big fans of Jason and Jaina, they could have at least maybe kept the Jason name. If they had kept Jason Solo instead of Ben Solo, they would have made a lot of EU fans very happy. You've got to remember, a lot of EU fans were pissed off when their entire universe got wiped out from the story group. Mara Jade, of course, is the big one. Mara Jade, of course, is a huge fan favorite in the expanded universe, massive fan favorite. And, of course, she doesn't exist in the canon stories yet as such. And a lot of fans have been busting their chops going, oh, when's Mara Jade coming in? Oh, bloody hell. But she doesn't exist. But in the expanded universe, as the Emperor's Hand, she was a massive fan favorite. You were right. There were 3 kids. Mara Jade Skywalker, not Mara Jade Skywalker. Luke and Mara had one, but I can't remember who that was. So somebody out there will tell me if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry that they lost Mara Jade and Luke's evolution with her in the EU. Exactly right. Well, Luke himself changes significantly from in the canon stories. In the canon stories, he's just parked his ass on Arc 2 and he's just hung out there. So whereas in the expanded universe, he actually was doing a fair bit. So, thank you, Jason, Jaina, and Anakin. But Anakin, I think, was, as I said, Mara and Luke's kid, if I'm not mistaken. So there you go. So was there a Ben Solo in the EU? I haven't read this stuff for 100 years. I really don't remember. But I'm sure it was a different characterization to the Ben Solo, Kylo Ren version that we have in the films. Anyway, there's a lot of kids that didn't make it through to the canon. So there you go. And Mara Jade, as we said, wasn't one of them. So she's still missing from the list. A significant one, of course, in Legends, Luke is still alive, the 18. But in canon, now, of course, with Leia, we know what happened because Carrie Fisher passed away. But Han, Luke, and Leia have all passed away. So I guess if you're a fan of the Legends books, at least your main characters still kept going, right? They didn't die. I mean, that's the thing about books. They can just live on forever. But in the films, that wasn't to be the case at all. So you've lost 3 of your main characters in the canon stories, which is unfortunate. A couple of them you probably could have avoided because clearly, Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are still going. So they could have kept chugging away if they wanted to, but they didn't. And, of course, the loss of Han and The Force Awakens pissed off a lot of people, even though you could see it coming a mile away because Harrison Ford always wanted to kill his character off. So, yes, exactly right. It's indeed. Gavin said he's never followed the EU. A lot of people didn't, actually. A lot of people did not get into the books or the comics, and that was fair enough too, because clearly it's a written medium. But what was important is that once they started down the path of creating the expanded universe, they followed it really well from a continuity point of view. Sure, the times jumped around a little bit. This book set here, this book set there, whatever. But they pretty much kept it all going the same way. All the authors would talk to each other and keep the flow of the story the same. And as time went on, they actually got better and better at it. And even though it got really big and convoluted and all the rest of it, it remained consistent. And that's why a lot of the fans really dialed into it. The problem was, it wasn't canon. It was just an interpretation of what could have been. So when the story group came in 2012 and they just said, nah, wipe the whole lot out. And obviously you had a lot of people who spent a lot of money, as I said earlier, on all the books and the comics for like 20-something years. They were naturally pissed off. And, so there's probably going to be aspects, as I said earlier, that people say, the expanded universe part of the story actually works better than what we have in canon. And this is just some of the examples that I've picked out on. So, once you start down the EU path, dominate your destiny. Yes, exactly right. And of course, in this one, funnily enough, Grand Admiral Thrawn got created in the Heir to Empire series, knocked off in the third book. But of course, in the canon version, he's still alive. We haven't seen him yet. We do know he's due to make an appearance, I think, in Ahsoka. But if there's anything, be thankful for that. Although, will fans be fans and go, oh my God, I totally disagree with how he's portrayed and how he looks and how he sounds and all the rest of it. But we know he's alive. He's been mentioned by in The Mandalorian by name. So there you go. If you don't read the comics and books, you miss part of the story. Yeah, unfortunately, that does happen, and that also covers over to the animated series as well, which I'll be bringing up very, very soon. So anyway, this is an interesting one. So they created the character of Thrawn, killed him off in the books 3 books later, whereas in this version, Thrawn is alive, even though we haven't seen him yet. So there you go. The funny one, Ahsoka does not exist in the expanded universe, but in canon she does, and she's a huge fan favorite. So because in the post Return of the Jedi novels, they were all written before the Clone Wars animated series came out, mostly. So that was sort of interesting. A new character came in that didn't exist previously, and everybody hated Ahsoka when she first appeared. Now she's a huge fan favorite. Everybody loves her. So now she's got her own TV series. Can't beat that, can you? And just lastly, so you had the Yuuzhan Vong was the main threat in the expanded universe. Some dudes from another galaxy, but some nasty parsies. And in the canon story, it's the Imperial Remnant, if you will, the first and / final order is the main thread. As I said, there are other things as well, but they're the things that I picked up on. So I thought that was quite interesting. So yes, so I'm sure even though it's 10 years since the expanded universe has been wiped out, there are some people going, you know what, there are aspects of those stories that were better than what we're seeing on screen or in comics these days. Yes. Now, do people for EU at the last? I'm not sure, but I know with Force Awakens, a lot of the EU fans were really shitty about it. I mean, it was just more for being pissed off than anything else. And as I said, at least in the expand universe, Han and Leia were together, and I really like that. But in the canon films, they weren't. So here you go. Gavin, is Thrawn the only Smurf in Star Wars? Oh, very, very cool. Yes, find him at a BP service station. So here's a question for everybody out there. I haven't got far to go, so I know it's 9 o'clock now. I might stretch on for another 20 minutes or thereabouts. Does the Skywalker saga work as a 9-part story? It is 9 chapters, right? Or 9 episodes. Does it work? And as I said, I made a point of rewatching Rise of Skywalker last night because I've only ever seen it a couple of times. And it is the Skywalker saga, right? The films, even though they originally started off as being through the eyes of R2 and 3PO, that was all chucked out the window as the movies went on because, like in The Last Jedi, you don't even see R2 until the end of the film. So does it work as a 9-part story? And this, so if you were going to watch them in episode order from Phantom Menace through to Rise of Skywalker, all in one go, does it work? And I would agree with Chris on this one. I don't think it does. My opinion is that the first 6 films, as in like Phantom Menace through to Return of the Jedi, is a complete story. You can certainly watch the original trilogy and not watch anything else. It's great. Oh, I want to learn more about what happened with Anakin and the Jedi Order and all the rest of it. Fine, watch the prequel trilogy. When you get to the end of Return of the Jedi, it is the perfect ending. Celebrate the love, right? The Empire's destroyed. The Sith are destroyed. Everybody's happy. The Ewoks are celebrating. Done. You don't need to go any further than that. Having said that, I would argue that if you're going to watch the sequel trilogy, watching just them by themselves as a completely separate piece of work does work. But as a full story, are the 3 movies necessary? No. And I think that's probably the issue. We'd always had in our minds that there were 9 parts to the entire saga, and George Lucas obviously had 9 sort of jotted down in his mind. But were the last 3 necessary? They were not. And I think that's probably what's brought a few people undone. Even though the rise of Palpatine kind of does work when you sit and think about it. Because if you get to, I've got to go back a few slides to find the picture I'm looking for. If you get to this picture here, it does work. His essence comes out. You don't see a dead body hitting the bottom of the thing. His essence comes out, flies off to Exegol. It kind of makes work. You can got to accept that. But in terms from an audience's perspective, I think it actually works quite well just with the 6 movies. So the Palpatine saga, that's a good way of looking at the sequel trilogy. That's actually a very good way of looking at it. Actually, I hadn't really thought of that. So, yeah. So I think, I mean, they obviously made the films because they wanted to get their money back. And I think by the time they got to Rise of Skywalker, Disney/Lucasfilm said, we just want to get it done, out of the way, move on, okay? Because it's worked in terms of bringing the money in, brings in a new fan base, but the old fan base isn't going for it. Fair enough. But, yeah, I think in the end, They could have just stuck with the 6 movies and left it at that. So, because the 6 movies, realistically, even if you aren't a fan of Phantom Menace and some of the visual effects are dated and all the rest of it, they fit really, really well. The George Lucas saga, if you will. And I think there's a lot to be said about that. So, even though the new movies do have some aspects to them which are really, really good. So, yeah, well, that's the thing. We mentioned about this earlier about the fact that they do use parts from the early movies, and you can see why, because they obviously worked. But yeah, it's like a separate issue altogether. So that then brings us to the rise of the anthology movies, Rogue One and Solo. And I remember when I first saw a trailer of Rogue One, before there was even a trailer, it was some handheld video footage from Celebration, and it was a sequence of a forest. I think if I recall, there was a TIE fighter, and in the distance was a Death Star, and there was all this radio chatter, this war radio chatter. And I thought, that is magnificent. That is grouse. Absolutely loved it. But not, and it's kind of funny, right? A lot of fans dialed into Rogue One. A lot of fans dialed into Solo. But there were a lot of people who just said, nah, to both of them. They just said, not interested. Haven't watched them. It doesn't work for them. And to be fair, that's a lot of the anti-Disney sentiment that's gone with it. So, in other words, they've been tainted by the first brush, which is Force Awakens. They don't want to see anything else. But the anthology movies, now, of course, when you get to Solo is clearly designed to have sequels. It was meant to have 2 more other movies, and it kind of just didn't. It just didn't do so well in the box office. The marketing was shit ass. It came out 5 months after, I think it was Last Jedi. Unbelievably bad timing. But as a movie, it was actually quite good. It was something different, providing you could get to the fact that Han Solo was a younger guy now. It was a different actor playing him, because all this time had been Harrison Ford. If you could do that, then it was actually quite good. And it filled in all these gaps. What was Han's backstory? Where did he come from? And what's the deal? And how did he get his name and all the rest of it? Same with Rogue One. How did they get the Death Star plans and all the rest of it? Really, really fantastic. But for whatever reason, the whole anthology series has sort of just died. It's stopped. And clearly, they're not making any more in the short term. Everything's now gone to series, Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and whatever else. So it's a formula that on paper had just winner, chicken dinner written all over it. But the reality is it hasn't worked. And certainly not in the eyes of the fans, certainly not in my eyes either. But someone out there didn't go for him. So, yeah, I like that one. Solo, the fan crusher. That's one way of looking at it, which is really, really unfortunate. Sure, the movie had a lot of problems being produced, but the end result was actually quite good. But I do find it funny when people look at some of these movies, Rogue One and or Solo, and they go, nah, they just didn't work, which is really surprising. So maybe it needed the episode title, episode 9.5 or 6.5 or something like that at the top. Gavin said Rogue One is best. Rogue One is an outstanding film, but not everybody has watched it. That's the downside to it. Rogue One was the first time I cried at Star Wars since I read one. Yeah. And I loved it. It was awesome. And it had a lot going for it, and it was something different, and it was a great story. And I agree with you. There's some really, really cool bits. And the fact that everybody died at the end, and go, oh, mate, how gross is that? Something completely left field. Gavin has said he watched Rogue One over 200 times. You're a nut. Oh, my God, mate. Psycho, dude. What can I say? And Grant has said Solo was great. I totally agree with you, but unfortunately it wasn't to be. So speaking of things that people have never watched, and this one is a bit of a killer, and it was just touched on earlier, I think it might have been from Chris, was the animated series. Animated Star Wars, right? Believe it or not, regardless of how good some of these things were, or in some cases how bad they were, not everybody watched them. So for those who don't know, this is canon series, right? So in between 2002 and 2005, a guy called Genndy, I think it is, makes an animated series called Clone Wars. Fast forward 7 or 8 years later, George Lucas and Dave Filoni get together and they produce The Clone Wars. Completely overwrites what Genndy did between the other 2 movies. And it's a 3D animated series. And if you love your Clone Wars stories, spectacular. Really deep, detailed, really in depth. The clones are all humanized. You get to learn who they are, what they are, their names, their idiosyncrasies, all these awesome stories. All right? Absolutely awesome. And you go, you know what? If you wanted to know more about what was going on in your Star Wars world, you couldn't go past them. And yet there were plenty of fans who just simply said, it's a cartoon, I don't watch it. And that's the downside of an animated series. Not everybody is going to watch it. And I think Lucasfilm tweaked on that, because even when they produced, as I said, like you got Rebels over here, which did have its good and bad points. And of course, this is set only a couple of years before New Hope. You had the same issue. Not everybody's going to watch it. And the crux, the irony, of course, is in the Clone Wars, Darth Maul comes back, right? He didn't die in Phantom Menace. He's still alive. And the way he brought him back, he was fantastic. His state of mind, how he became what he became. And, of course, then he appears in Solo, right? The movie over here. And everybody wonders, where did he come from? Didn't he die in Phantom Menace? And, of course, he's had this entire story in the Clone Wars. So, and then he pops up in Rebels as well. So, I guess the funny thing is that if you're a hardcore dedicated fan, you go, you know what, I really want to get into the animated stuff because there's a lot of really good things there, but not everybody did. And I guess that's unfortunate. If it had been a live action series, probably yes. But because it's an animated series, it just didn't work for a lot of people. And it was unfortunate because they end up missing out on a lot of great stuff. And of course, the irony is that many of the characters that were invented for the animated series, whether they be Ahsoka or Bo-Katan or all these other characters, are now being brought into live action. Right? And people going, that character's awesome. Who are they? And of course, fans of the animated series go, mate, they've been around for years. Right? Yeah, we know about Maul, we know about Bo-Katan, we know about Ahsoka, especially Ahsoka. We know all these things. So these are the people who are now having to try and catch up with what's going on. And I reckon that's really quite astounding. So there you go. Where are we? A few comments here. Solo Rogue One was a real movie. Solo was not. It depends on how you define a real movie, but I guess it's each their own. Rogue One was better than Solo. Once again, it depends on what you like. If you're a Han Solo fan, you probably think otherwise, but yeah, that's fair enough. The Vile, I said he broke down into crying mess when Leia died, had a profound impact. Well, it did, actually, because you knew that Carrie Fisher passed away in real life, so I get that. Vader stole Rogue One. Yeah, I'd said at the time that the sequence with him on Mustafar and Krennic was just added in for marketing purposes because they wanted to show they need to have this cool dude pop up in the series. Let's invent a scene, shove him in there. It made no sense to the story. If you cut that whole scene out and just join the two other bits together, would have been perfect. And having Vader just appear right at the very end to slice and dice the Rebel guys would have been spectacular. But shit house for the marketing guru. So animation set off a medical issue with me and then in battle scenes. Okay. Obviously, you got past your medical issues, so because you're still around, which is awesome to hear. Original Clone Wars series was brilliant. Also showed how Anakin got his right eye scar. I think you're talking about the Jendi series at that point, because in the animated series, he was already a Jedi Knight. He already had the long hair, the Revenge of the Sith look. That's the reason why you can't watch both series. They sort of clash with each other. Yeah, Clones and Rebels was great. Resistance, not so much. Oh, yeah, Resistance was... Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Absolutely friggin' awful. So... yeah, didn't like it at all. Although Gavin watched it, he enjoyed it. But yeah, Resistance was hard work. It was clearly designed for the kiddies. So there you go. I've only got a couple more things I want to cover off. So we're talking about new shows and things that are going on. And there's a lot of stuff that's coming out. Now, of course, The Bad Batch has come and gone, at least the first season. Visions has come and gone, at least the first season of that. Rangers of the New Republic has been put on hold for whatever reason. But the rest are sort of in their process of being either made, completed, or getting released this year. And I guess time will tell as to which ones work, which ones don't work. There's been issues with the Book of Boba Fett. Last week saw that with the Chapter 3, as we said, with the Vespers. So not everything is guaranteed to be a huge success. And, I mean, from my point of view, I'm looking at The Mandalorian up here, and I go, if they do a season 4 of that, season 3, season 4 of that, if there's no Grogu, how they're going to cope with that. Personally, I'm looking forward to Andor. I really hope to go the hard yards on that one because he's a character from Rogue One that most people don't know anything about. Obi-Wan Kenobi over here is due in the next couple of months. I'll have to watch this space to see how that works. As for everything else, wait and see. I guess it will work for some and not work for others. So I don't know. Interesting stuff. But that's the Star Wars franchise for you. There's a lot of stuff coming out now, and I guess you get to pick and choose as to what you really, really like. But Lucasfilm have picked up on the fact that TV series are the way to go. That's where all the attention is. Movies, maybe not so much. Animated series, definitely not. So wait and see. All right, so I'm going to bring up 5 Star Wars facts about me that you probably didn't know before we sort of just wrap this up. These are ones you like. Even people who know me really, really well, there's going to be a couple of things here. They go, shit, I didn't know that about you. And the first thing I'm going to bring up, believe it or not, and you're going to laugh when you hear this one, right, is I actually joined the 501st in 2000. Believe it or not, fans, I am possibly either the first or, if not, one of the first ever 501st members in Melbourne, right? So I've been around longer than any of these other turkeys that have been jumping around in these screen accurate suits and all this sort of shit. I actually joined in 2002 because the 501st first started in Sydney, in this country. Back then, of course, social media didn't exist. The internet was still relatively new. And I'd heard about them and I signed up. And before the whole screen accurate thing was going on, I deliberately picked the name ID 2077, which stands for Imperial something or other, 2077, because 2077 will be when Star Wars: A New Hope turns 100 years old. Okay, but of course, I never attended anything, never went to anything because there was nothing around. In Sydney there was, but not in Victoria. So I'm not even listed on their current list today. So I looked it up today. I'm not even there. But how about that? So I joined the 501st, never attended anything, but I was probably the first, if not the first, as I said, member in Melbourne. So I know more about the 501st than anybody, and I actually not a part of them whatsoever. So did anybody guess that one at all? So yes, exactly right. Absolutely love it. The chance of Star Wars burnout. I agree with you. There's definitely a chance of that because even these days, people are saying, "Oh my God, there's all this stuff coming out. Give me the next thing. Give me the next thing." It's like, mate, just sort of accept what you got. I agree with you, William. Too many shows. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, and we saw that with the Bad Batch. It came and went, and people just moved on to the next thing. So, yes. Obi-Wan's first words aren't hello there. Yeah, well, it's very interesting. He's supposed to be living in exile on Tatooine, so he can't have too many adventures because he's not meant to be sort of out and about, running around, making his presence felt. He's supposed to be in hiding, so I'd be curious to see how that goes. Yeah, all that time and you're still the same rank. Yeah, exactly right. So how about that? Yeah, I was a member of the 501st back in 2002, long before it became this big popular thing that it is today. So, yay team for me. I have actually auctioned off in real life actors from the movies. This is something that nobody will know. In real life, right? So I have actually auctioned off in a Queensland convention in 2002 again. The actress who played Aura Singh, and I can't pronounce her name, is Michonne, some French name, and Jeremy Bulloch came out. And they'll be auctioned off to go to lunch with people. And I was the auctioneer for that convention. I was myself and my other half were the only Victorians who went to this convention called the Kessel Run Convention in Queensland. So if you're in Queensland in 2002, you'd know about it. No one else from any other state went, right? Except for me and my other half. So I actually got to auction off actors from the movies. How good is that? Who gets to do that in their lives, right? And so I had actually Michonne standing next to me. I had Jeremy standing next to me. So who's going to pay X amount of dollars to have lunch with Boba Fett and the real Boba Fett? And that's exactly what happened. So what do you reckon of that? How good is that? And Michonne, it's very funny. They put her in like the makeup with the hair and all the rest of it. In real life, she was a bikini model, and it's an absolutely stunning woman. But I couldn't pronounce her surname. So there you go. So I've actually sold off actors from the movies. What do you reckon of that, kids? Good stuff. All right. So I wore my first Stormtrooper costume back in 1986. Right, and I almost ended up on Young Talent Time with it. So what happened is there was an episode dealing with Halley's Comet, and there was a guy here who had built Stormtrooper suits out of fiberglass. He was way ahead of everybody else. 1986, right? This is long before the 501st Alliance guys existed. And as it turned out, there was a bit of there were 6 of us all organised to turn up for Young Talent Time, and unfortunately, a 7th guy turned up. He was a friend of mine. There was a bit of a mix-up in communications. So. So how good is that? So I almost ended up because in the end we flipped the coin. I lost the toss and he got to wear the suit and I didn't. But I almost ended up on the Halley's Comet version of Young Talent Time in a Stormtrooper costume. But yeah, they had it back in 1986, and they were made of fiberglass, right? And believe me, they were totally unforgiving in terms of their movement, right? Like unlike plastic, there was like you put the leg piece around your lower leg and it would cut your leg off in half. It was that rigid. It was fantastic. But they were gleaming white. He made 6 suits and a Darth Vader suit. So I missed it by that much. So there you go. And I have a copy of the episode, and all the guys are involved, but unfortunately, I wasn't one of them. How much did they went for? I can't remember. This is 20 years ago. 20 years ago this year, actually. And I have all these stories I could tell you about that convention and how it went and all the rest of it. I have to say that for another day because they're long stories. And it wasn't a very successful event, unfortunately. So there you go. But no, I can't remember. But I was the auctioneer, right? You remember at the start, I said I've auctioned off things, hundreds of hours worth of stuff. Yeah, that was one of my key things. The irony of paying for a bounty hunter. Well, exactly right. So yes, and of course, Aura Singh, as we know, got killed off. I think is referenced in Solo. I think, if I'm not mistaken. So very, very groovy. So there you go. Wore a Stormtrooper suit in 1986. So yeah, how about that, eh? Very, very cool. Young Talent Time. Yay, team. I got to go to the filming and all the rest of it because I was there on the day and I ended up being in the audience. So got to see them all when they're all youngies, Danny Minogue and all those guys. So yeah, it was very, very groovy. I own the Sith for Victoria, car number plate. Something I was very, very proud to have. 1TH. It's actually the real word, Sith. And I do have Sith 2 as well. And I was more than happy to buy that. I love this. And this is one of prize collectibles because no one else can have one of these. Sure, you can have it for different states, because New South Wales and Queensland or whatever. But I have the Victorian one. And it's something I'm very, very proud of. Yes. And I don't have it on my car at the moment because I drive an Audi and it doesn't really suit the Audi. But yes, the Sith will live once more. The Sith will rule Vic roads, and that's me. So yes, I'm very, very groovy. And finally, believe it or not, and this used to throw everybody off, I'm not a Star Wars collector, and I never really have been. So there used to be this assumption that being a big wig in the Star Wars fan club, I actually collected Star Wars, and I didn't at all. I collected some of the movie posters, but it was too big, too competitive. Too much money, and because I've been to Steve Sansweet's place a couple of times, I was like, mate, you can't compete with him. And like Chris was here earlier, and he's obviously collected a lot of Star Wars stuff. It was just too hard, and I just never got into it. And people assumed that I did. Now, how much stuff do you have, Dags? None, zero, very, very little. So how about that, eh? So there you go. You learn something new every day. All right. I'm about to wrap this up in a sec. So we're talking about, ironically, the Book of Boba Fett was on tonight, right? For those who don't know, myself and Aaron, we actually do reviews of the show on Monday nights. So the episode came out tonight. We'll be discussing Chapter 4 on Monday. So I don't know how the episode went because I'll watch it tonight, which is kind of groovy. Gavin said he's not a Star Wars collector, only Yoda. But if Yoda is from Star Wars, then strictly speaking, you are a Star Wars collector. So there you go. But I get where you're coming from. So if you are interested in watching this show and thinking, you want to hear more of our thoughts and views on the Book of Boba Fett, check it out on the Mondays. There we go. And then, of course, that brings me to the end of the discussion regarding Star Wars. And as actually Chris once said, whether it be the prequels, the sequels, or the original trilogy, the animated series, whatever, it's all Star Wars. We all love it. How good is that? Only 5. How good's that in the whole show? Yeah, I am trying to teach myself to knock it off. And so you're probably all wondering, what am I going to be covering off next week in the last episode of this entire series? And of course, I'm wearing the shirt for it. I'm going to be talking about, look at that, classic sci-fi stuffs. One of my absolute passions. We ran a convention back in 2012 called Con 9 from Outer Space 10 years ago. Oh my God, where's the 10 years gone? We're going to be having a huge chat about sci-fi movies and from the 40s and the 50s and all the rest of it. And for those who haven't put two and two together, so I've got the shirt on. It's the checklist shirt. Absolutely love it. So yeah, it'd be fantastic. So there you go. How about all that? Yeah, you're right, Gavin. You're right, Christy. Circular logic there. I'm not a Star Wars collector. I'm a Yoda collector, but Yoda comes from Star Wars, ergo. So, oh goodness. Oh yeah, Chris is still here. So absolutely glad to see you could join us, old son, Mr. Uncle Darth from way up in Queensland way. So there you go. Very, very cool. All right. So that actually brings me to the end of the discussion. All my googling for the past hour and nearly hour and a half. Star Wars is a fantastic franchise. Some parts work for some people, other parts work for other people. But overall, be thankful it's still there. It still exists because it easily could have finished in 2012. And if George Lucas had said, no, I'm done, I'm packing up, going home, taking my bat and ball and leaving, and 10 years later, we would have nothing. So at least there is still stuff out there, whether you like it or not. As I said earlier, just got to learn to sort of play friendly. Some things will work for you, some things won't. But the important thing is that it's there. And we're all still friends because of it. We're all sort of know each other. And it's important that we don't forget that. So there you go. All right, guys, I'm going to leave you to a party hard rock on next week's last episode. Make sure you join it. Okay, take care. Bye for now.